gonna die no matter what I do. Right. So... I'm not going to get what's coming to them! No. But first, I'm coming after him. The son of a bitch who...
The story begins with a wealthy young girl sadly staring at her torn puppy doll. Her mother suggests throwing it away, arguing that even if repaired, it would never look good again. Though attached, the girl reluctantly agrees. They discard it with the trash. The bag ends up in a garbage truck headed for the city's underground dump. As the mother returns home, a mysterious robed man watches her, silently judging her carelessness. Meanwhile, the same truck arrives at the scrapyard. A boy is seen rummaging through trash bags by a guard, who immediately suspects him of being the notorious scavenger trash thief. When the guard sounds an alarm, the boy throws trash to create a diversion and flees through a ventilation tunnel. He's shot but escapes into the sewers. Emerging on a quiet street, he breaks his silence, insisting he is not a thief. He explains he only recovers wrongly discarded items, like the puppy doll. The next morning, rumors about the trash thief spread. Two women gossip about how disgusting and dangerous such people are. A shabbily dressed outcast overhears them and quietly leaves the pristine city through a small gate, entering the slum outside its walls. News of the trash raid spreads quickly in the slum, causing fear of a heavy police presence. A girl named Chi confronts her friend, Rudo, a boy with red eyes, accusing him of causing the trouble. Rudo is sorting through his collected junk, mostly broken toys and accessories he plans to repair. He argues it's not trash but usable items carelessly discarded by the rich. He fixes and sells them to slum residents who will appreciate them. Chi understands but teasingly asks if he has feelings for the trash. Suddenly, 3 bullies arrive. They mock the stench and tell Chi to avoid a trash collector. One kicks a lamp Rudo just fixed, sneering that no one wants things touched by an outcast like him. The arrogant leader insists they are nothing like Rudo and can escape the slum if they try. He reveals the slum was originally for criminals, and they are all descendants of offenders. Things were tolerable until Rudo's parents committed a mass murder, destroying any remaining sympathy from the city. After the bullies leave, Chi tries to comfort Rudo, saying he is a good person who will succeed. She notices the puppy doll, and Rudo shyly admits he wanted to give it to her as a gift. But as she is about to take it, her mother arrives, yelling at her to stay away from him and drags her off. That night, Rudo finds Redo, the same outcast from earlier, waiting in his home. Redo teases him for failing to win Chi over and admits to spying on him. He asks about the trash raid and tells Rudo he doesn't need to work for money since he's still a child, even though they aren't blood related. Redo explains he considers Rudo family. Grateful, Rudo says Redo took him in after his parents' crime and raised him, so he is determined to repay him, even if it means scavenging. Noticing a gunshot wound on Rudo's arm, Redo treats it and firmly warns him to stay away from the scrapyard. Rudo brushes it off, saying the wound is nothing compared to the black stains left by his parents' deeds, showing his strangely shaped hands. Since childhood, he was mocked for them until Redo gave him gloves, giving him the courage to move forward. Redo insists he must stop before the guards discover his true identity, or he'll be thrown into the abyss like his father. Jokingly, Redo nudges Rudo to hurry and give the doll to Chi before someone else does, leading to a light-hearted argument. Unbeknownst to them, the same robed figure stands outside, listening. The next day, Redo tries to adjust Rudo's expression, gently holding his cheeks and telling him to pretend to smile to hide his sadness. Rudo pulls away and steps outside. Seeing his reflection in water, he thinks his messy face can't be fixed but wonders if Chi has already gone out. He heads toward the abyss, remembering he doesn't need to go far for trash. Everything discarded ends up there, including people and criminals. As he stares into the chasm, he recalls his father, who was allegedly thrown in. Just then, Chi appears and mentions another criminal is being thrown into the pit. Startled, Rudo says it's unusual to see her here. For him, the view is nothing special. The slum was built on the city's edge as a reminder, break the rules, and you'll be thrown into the abyss. The irony is that no matter how hard you try to avoid watching people being thrown to their deaths, you still see it. She warns Rudo she doesn't want him to end up like that. She knows there's much trash that shouldn't be discarded, but it's not worth risking his life. If he's caught, he'll be thrown into the pit, and it would break her heart because she loves him. Hearing this, a flustered Rudo trips and rolls on the ground. She notices he's still holding the puppy doll from the previous day. He offers it to her as a gift, though he admits she might not want it since he found it in the dump. She happily accepts it. As she takes it, Rudo runs off excitedly but stumbles and bumps into 4 guards. They ignore him and leave, leaving Rudo confused about their presence. He desperately runs to find Redo and warn him, but upon arriving home, he witnesses a horrifying scene, a masked man stabbing Redo, whose body is covered in blood. Rudo tries to scream for help, but no one is around to hear. He desperately attacks the man but is easily pushed aside. When Rudo comes to, it's too late. The man is done with Redo. Frozen in shock, Rudo can only watch helplessly as the mysterious man walks away. Finally snapping out of it, he screams Redo's name and rushes to his side, but there's nothing he can do. Redo tells Rudo he must go, but Rudo refuses to leave him. Redo shouts that Rudo must be the one to change this rotten world, that only he has the power to make a difference, so he must survive. Overwhelmed with love for Redo, Rudo can't let go. At that moment, guards arrive and arrest him next to Redo's lifeless body. Without hesitation, they tase him and accuse him of the murder. Rudo protests, insisting they're all wrong and that Redo could still be saved if they hurry. But the guards, considering themselves superior to slum dwellers, don't care. They only want to arrest who they think is the culprit. Rudo tries to explain he didn't kill anyone and that the real murderer just escaped, but they accuse him by virtue of him being from the slums. He is taken directly to the abyss. At the chasm's edge as people gossip about him, Chi also hears the rumors. They say he killed the man who raised him, branding him a murderer. Heartbroken, she had believed in him. As he stands on the platform about to be thrown, priests declare him a criminal deserving of the pit. The crowd chants, "Send the filth to the hole," urging the priests to throw him in. Rudo wonders if anyone will listen. He didn't do it, but no one wants to believe him. Looking around, he sees Chi in the crowd and feels her condemning him too. In his mind, he recalls how she had trusted and defended him when everyone called him a murderer, but in the end, he disappointed her and truly became one. She drops the gift he gave her and leaves, filled with disappointment. Seeing her leave and realizing no one will defend him, Rudo is consumed by sorrow. He was judged before anything even happened, and that alone makes him hate everyone. With bitterness in his heart, he vows to make them all pay. At that moment, he is thrown directly into the abyss, swallowed by darkness. He feels his life flashing before his eyes as everything fades. His eyes close, swallowed by the void until, to his surprise, they open again. Rudo realizes he has truly been thrown into the abyss. He always heard how dark it was, but he never knew it was a living hell. As he observes his surroundings, strange sounds and movements catch his attention. Turning around, he sees a terrifying sight, a massive creature entirely made of garbage. Rudo fled for his life, but the trash creature called for reinforcements. Soon, 2 more appeared, trapping him. He could barely comprehend the reality that massive piles of garbage were somehow alive and attacking him. Yet the danger was all too real, and a human skull lying on the ground made clear what his fate would be if he didn't act quickly. Suddenly, the trash beneath Rudo's feet gave way, plunging him to a lower level. The impact was painful, knocking the air from his lungs. Worse, the stench here was unbearable, making it difficult to breathe. He knew he had to find cover before the monsters caught him, but scanning the area, he saw nothing but trash piles offering no real shelter. Rudo was on the verge of despair, convinced death was inevitable. But then, Rigto's final words flashed in his mind, reigniting his will to survive. He refused to die before making everyone pay, those who treated him like trash, the people who let him be thrown into the pit, and especially the heartless killer who took Rigto's life. One of the horrific creatures tried to ambush him while he was distracted. Rudo's rage peaked, and he swung a metal pipe with such force that the creature's head flew off. At that moment, a man standing on a nearby trash pile noticed Rudo across the waste-filled field and watched with curiosity. Rudo fought back against the monsters, swinging his pipe with all his strength, but it had little effect on their garbage-made bodies. One of them knocked him sideways, and he fell painfully to the dirty ground. Finally, Rudo grabbed a street sign and hurled it at one of the trash monsters, landing a solid blow that actually caused real damage. But the toxic air was starting to affect him. He knew he couldn't keep this up. Seeing him struggle to stand, the 2 trash monsters seized the opportunity and attacked together. At the last second, Rudo grabbed a piece of metal and swung it with all his might, slicing clean through one of the monsters. This caused a massive explosion of garbage, giving Rudo a moment of relief, but his victory was short-lived. Another monster emerged right in front of him, this one larger and more terrifying than the last. With no other choice, Rudo turned and ran for his life. The monster slammed the ground, hurling Rudo into the air to land right in front of the observing man. Rudo was confused by the man's sudden appearance, though he was still struggling to breathe due to the overwhelming stench. Without a word, the man lifted him, randomly kicked something on the floor, and then placed a gas mask over Rudo's face. Initially angry, Rudo soon realized he could now breathe properly and felt he should be grateful. He looked at the man and expressed his thanks for the help, though he still had questions about their location in the trash monsters. These were reasonable concerns, but the mysterious man just told him to be quiet. Rudo didn't understand why the man wouldn't answer him, so he started shouting, demanding explanations. He had just been thrown into this place and had no idea what was happening. He refused to stay quiet until the man told him something. His shouting only angered the man, who yelled back that this was one of many toxic wastelands left by round beings like Rudo, and he would have explained in time if Rudo had just stayed quiet. But now, because of all the noise, they would have to face the creatures again. The man explained that the creatures were trash beasts, monsters formed from garbage, unaffected by ordinary weapons, and triggered by sound. Rudo's shouting had essentially attracted every trash beast nearby. The ones in this area were particularly dangerous, so the man had hoped not to alert them, but it was too late. Energy flowed from the man's arm into his umbrella. Right before Rudo's eyes, the umbrella transformed. As a trash monster lunged, the man sliced it to pieces with the altered umbrella. Rudo could hardly believe how easily the man defeated the creature, but with more on the way, the fight was far from over. The man prepared to attack and within moments, dispatched most of the beasts with ease. Rudo was amazed by what he saw and couldn't help but wonder what made the umbrella so powerful. If only he had something like that, he could finally make all the bastards in the city pay for what they did to him. One of the trash monsters began spewing purple slime, and the man immediately knew it was best not to touch it. He deflected the slime with his umbrella, then thrust it directly into the monster's head, killing it. After finishing the job, he returned to Rudo to check on him. He removed his mask to introduce himself as Injin, a sanitation worker, but immediately regretted it. The foul air was still unbearable. Moments later, Rudo passed out from exhaustion in his injuries. While unconscious, memories from his past with Redo surfaced. Back when Rudo was a child, he once came home covered in mud. Redo asked what had happened. Rudo explained that a group of kids had pushed him down. He had only told them that objects could come to life if you cared for them long enough, as a soul could eventually inhabit them. But the kids just laughed and started teasing him afterward. Rudo had heard this story from Redo, so he felt guilty for spreading it and causing trouble. However, Reg believed that objects could have souls. This excited Rudo, who eagerly asked if that meant everything in the room had a soul too. Reg replied that anything could have a soul, even the gloves Rudo was wearing, as long as he truly valued them. Then, Rudo woke up to find Injin dragging him across the floor. He started shouting, demanding to know why he was chained. Injin calmly explained that Rudo was still a stranger, and there was no way he would bring an unknown person back to his base without taking some security measures first. Rudo struggled and demanded that Injin release him, insisting he needed to return to the city immediately. But Injin explained that was impossible. What Rudo called the city was known as the sphere here, and it constantly changed position in the sky, making it hard to find. Reaching it would be impossible. There were other complications too, but the bottom line was that Rudo was stuck here for now, so he might as well accept it and stop making a fuss. But Rudo wouldn't back down. He was determined to make the fools in that world pay, no matter what. Injin said he was stuck for now, which meant there must be a way back eventually. Rudo demanded answers, urging Injin to explain everything about this place and how to escape. He warned that he wouldn't stop annoying Injin until he got the information he wanted. Injin grew tired of Rudo's incessant shouting. So, he told him that if he really wanted to know what this place was like, he would get a real-world lesson. Injin continued dragging Rudo until they reached an abandoned gas station with a few trucks parked out front. Without a word, Injin ushered Rudo in, wished him luck, and left him there to figure things out on his own. At that moment, Rudo noticed several men staring at him, all seemingly stunned by his appearance. They found his clothing strange and began wondering if he was a spherite. To confirm their suspicions, they asked Rudo where he was from. Rudo told them he fell from what they called the sphere. As he said this, all the men removed their masks in shock. They had never met a living spherite before. The group struggled to accept that someone from the sphere could survive such a fall, but Rudo's bruised face made it hard to doubt his story. Feeling disturbed by the stranger's touch, Rudo pulled away. The men quickly apologized for their rudeness, explaining they rarely met anyone like him. They had just gotten a bit carried away by curiosity. Their leader noticed Rudo's discomfort with the chains and offered to adjust them. For a moment, Rudo thought the man might be kind, until the situation changed. Instead of freeing him, they shackled him to the back of their truck, laughing at how stupid Rudo was to trust a group of strangers he didn't know. As they secured the chain, the leader warned the others to handle Rudo carefully. They didn't want to damage their merchandise. Spherite parts were highly valuable here, with eyes, fingers, and even clothing fetching the highest prices. But the leader never dreamed they would get a living, breathing hated one. The man figured Rudo must be wondering why spherite parts were in such demand. He explained it plainly: everyone on the surface hated spherites. For generations, they had done nothing but dump their waste here, endless mountains of trash poisoning the air and ruining the land. Worse, the filth gave birth to monsters, in the leader's view. Spherites had been killing people slowly for years, drowning them in poison and filth. So once word got out that Rudo was one of them, people wouldn't just want him dead, they would want him hurt. Not that the leader cared if Rudo was tortured or torn apart, he would still profit from selling him. But before doing anything else, the leader decided to get some personal revenge first. He forced a handful of rotten garbage into Rudo's mouth, thinking Rudo might never have experienced real suffering before. But as he shoved another handful down Rudo's throat, Rudo bit down on his fingers, tearing the flesh clean off the bone. The leader recoiled in pain, but Rudo kept chewing the flesh and even swallowed it. Back in the slums, Rudo had to survive by constantly eating scraps like this. To him, nothing was different now. Prejudice remained the same. Wherever Rudo ended up, people would always find a reason to treat him as worthless. He was sick of it. He broke free from the chains. And at this point, Rudo lost all control. The only thing driving him now was the urge to kill. From a nearby cliff, Injin had been observing everything, and he was thoroughly impressed with Rudo's potential. Rudo remembered Rigto's words, that if you care for something long enough, it will eventually awaken a soul. As he reached out and caught a floating chain, it suddenly turned red, stunning the thugs. In this world, there were rare individuals like Injin, those who could give life to objects and bring out their true potential. Rudo was one such person. The chain in Rudo's hand transformed, making the thugs hesitate to attack. But the leader soon reminded them that even if Rudo was a giver, without the chain, he was powerless. Motivated by this, they managed to knock the chain from his hand. Even so, it didn't slow Rudo down. He grabbed a tire and used it to beat them all down. The only one left standing was the leader, and he was utterly helpless against Rudo. With no other option, he began hurling endless insults. But all this did was fuel Rudo's rage further. He was about to finish the man when, at the last moment, Injin intervened and stopped him. It was then that Rudo finally came to his senses, and right after, the tire he had used crumbled to dust. Rudo was completely confused about what had just happened or how he managed it, but he suspected his glove had something to do with it. Injin apologized for leaving him in that situation and explained that he needed to find out what Rudo could really do now, since it was clear Rudo was a purifier. Jin made Rudo an offer: he would answer any question Rudo had, but in return, Rudo would have to join him and the other cleaners. Rudo, however, didn't trust him and immediately refused. Injin took Rudo to the hospital due to his severe injuries and had him treated by a doctor. While there, Injin told one of his teammates that he had found a naturally gifted kid to add to their team. Rudo protested, shouting that he never agreed to join, but Injin replied that he didn't really have a say, he wouldn't survive out there alone. The doctor also began scolding Rudo, calling him reckless for venturing into the lawless zone by himself. He was shocked Rudo was still alive after inhaling so much toxic air and said he should be grateful Injin came to save him. Just looking at Rudo's face annoyed him, so he told him to pay the bill and leave. Afterward, Injin covered the medical costs, and the two left together. Rudo appreciated everything Injin had done for him but insisted he couldn't join the team. He had to return to the sphere to get revenge. He had no time to wander around here scavenging trash. Injin told Rudo he was free to try asking around for a way back to the sphere, but first, he needed to understand a few things. Everyone here hated spherites, and if people found out Rudo was one, things would go badly. Nothing was free here, no one would just give him information. Wandering around asking questions wouldn't get him anywhere. Injin bought some burgers, and they sat at a nearby table. Rudo thoroughly enjoyed the meal, even feeling surprised since he had always imagined the pit as a barren wasteland. But now that he was actually there, he realized the city was just like any other, only with more trash scattered around. Injin decided to explain how things worked here. He said trash often carried traces of emotional energy known as ma. Sometimes it accumulated and formed into a single large entity. That was how trash beasts like the one Rudo fought were born. These creatures attacked people on sight, though they usually stayed near dumping grounds, so city dwellers rarely encountered them. However, sometimes one would appear and cause chaos in the city. Moreover, defeating these beasts wasn't easy. You had to destroy their core, which required special equipment like Jin's umbrella or Rudo's gloves. These might look like ordinary objects, but if treated with enough care over time, they could become inhabited, turning into powerful tools against the beasts. Only a few people could wield such instruments. They were known as givers, and fortunately, Rudo was one of them. Injin explained that he was a cleaner, part of a group specialized in exterminating trash beasts. They always needed givers, so he offered Rudo a job on his team. Rudo demanded to know if Injin would really tell him how to return to the sphere in exchange for his cooperation. Injin admitted he didn't know how to reach the sphere. He had only lied earlier to ensure Rudo would listen. Furious at being tricked, Rudo glared, but Injin brushed it off, saying his boss knew more about what went on here. If anyone could help Rudo return to the sphere, it was him. Still, Rudo felt frustrated that he now had to deal with Injin's boss just for a chance to go back. Just then, Injin received a call and said he needed to go handle something quickly. Before leaving, he handed Rudo a bag of money and told him he could spend it as he liked while he was gone. Rudo was stunned by the gesture and questioned whether it was really okay for him to accept it. Injin assured him, "It's no big deal. It's money from selling your clothes." Rudo hadn't noticed until now, but his clothes were indeed gone, and he was angry Injin had sold them without asking. However, Injin argued that he was actually helping him. Wearing clothes from the sphere around here would only draw the wrong kind of attention. Before Rudo could yell, Injin left. But while Rudo was distracted, a cat suddenly jumped down, snatched the money from the table, and ran off. Rudo immediately gave chase, pursuing it down an alley where the cat disappeared. It was too fast. Rudo knew he couldn't catch it empty-handed. To even the odds, he grabbed a nearby stick, using it to trap the cat, but in his hurry, he didn't realize the stick had an owner, who was now furious. The man accused Rudo of stealing from him, but Rudo was completely confused. He didn't remember taking anything. The man pointed at the stick in Rudo's hand, saying that was what he was talking about. Rudo was baffled. How could something as ordinary and useless as a stick mean so much to someone? The man snatched it back and said it wasn't a dumb object, it wasn't something Rudo could take without serious consequences. He then activated his vital instrument and said he would teach Rudo a lesson about respect. Slamming the stick on the ground, he warned Rudo that being a gifted giver didn't mean he could take whatever he wanted. Rudo asked how the man knew who he was. He introduced himself as Zanka, one of the cleaners, and explained that Injin had told him about Rudo and asked Zanka to teach him how to use his gloves. Injin clearly had high hopes for Rudo, but he was far from reaching his full potential, especially if he still needed to learn something as basic as not taking things that didn't belong to him. Rudo tried to explain that he hadn't been stealing the stick, he only wanted to use it to catch the cat that had taken his money. But Zanka refused to listen to his justification. He snapped at Rudo, saying that if he believed taking others' belongings was okay, he must have had a terrible father. But when Zanka insulted Rudo, he went too far, and Rudo's eyes blazed with anger. At that moment, Rudo remembered a lesson Rudo had taught him, that anger only fuels conflict, and people rarely listen when emotions run high. Sometimes stepping back and seeing things from another's perspective could lead to a calmer resolution. Remembering this, Rudo chose to apply that wisdom. He tried to see the situation from Zanka's point of view. Zanka was angry because he believed Rudo had tried to steal his cherished stick. Rudo understood that feeling. He would be just as mad if someone tried to take his gloves. Keeping that in mind, he sincerely apologized to Zanka. The apology worked. Zanka lowered his weapon and told Rudo he was ready to move on. He even apologized for threatening him earlier, admitting that although he was annoyed as Rudo's mentor, he should have stayed calm. Rudo was surprised how quickly things calmed down after he apologized. Without anger, Zanka seemed like a completely different person. Zanka reached out to help Rudo up and asked what his vital instrument was. Rudo admitted he was pretty sure it was his gloves but didn't yet know how to activate them consciously. As Zanka began explaining how vital instruments worked, Rudo barely listened, too distracted by how friendly Zanka seemed when he smiled. He wondered if this was what Rudo meant when he said, "You'd look better with a smile on your face," and he wanted to try it himself. He'd been practicing for a while, so he should be able to smile properly by now. But when Rudo attempted to smile, it looked even worse than before. Zanka stared in confusion. Whatever expression Rudo was making, it was not a smile. Annoyed, he assumed Rudo was mocking him. Even though he himself was trying to be friendly, Rudo insisted he was genuinely trying to smile. But with such a scowling face, it was nearly impossible to take him seriously. Besides, Zanka deeply disliked Rudo's attitude toward the cleaners' work. They were here every day risking their lives to save others, while Rudo might only be doing this for some foolish reason. Rudo remembered Reto's last words, urging him to change the world, and he grew angry that Zanka was mocking his goal when he was completely serious. Zanka admitted he had tried to give Rudo a fair chance, but he couldn't force himself to get along with him, so he stopped pretending to be nice. Rudo was tired of holding back, so he picked up a piece of scrap and declared he would beat Zanka up. Zanka was astonished to see Rudo fighting with something other than his gloves and finally understood what Injin meant by calling Rudo a natural fighter. Though impressed, he believed raw talent like Rudo's was useless without proper skill. Just then, Rudo realized Zanka was no longer holding his stick. As he looked up, he saw it floating right toward him. He dodged just in time, but Zanka quickly closed the distance and began pressing him hard. Rudo finally saw an opening to counter, but his strike only left a small cut on Zanka's cheek. Zanka threw Rudo to the ground, mocking him as useless, but then he felt something on his cheek and was shocked. After sniffing it, he realized it was filth. Looking at Rudo, he saw that the weapon Rudo had picked up earlier was a filth vacuum. Rudo had no idea why Zanka was so panicked, but he wasn't about to give up. So even as Zanka desperately pleaded, after a pause, Rudo kept chasing him. Convinced this weird vacuum was some kind of deadly weapon, Rudo proudly leapt into the air and swung it toward Zanka, splattering filth all over his clothes. Moments later, Injin showed up to check on Rudo, only to find him next to a filth-covered Zanka. On their way, after Rudo explained everything, Injin laughed heartily. He never imagined Rudo and Zanka's first meeting would involve Rudo throwing filth at him. Zanka was basically the definition of a spoiled rich kid, so being splattered with filth was a total humiliation. Rudo hadn't realized he was throwing filth the whole time, so now he felt embarrassed. He found it disgusting even by his own standards. However, Injin saw the whole situation as a good way for them to get to know each other. He assured Rudo that Zanka was the most talented giver when it came to wielding vital instruments, so he would be a great teacher. Zanka felt flattered that Injin respected him so much. As he basked in the praise, Rudo noticed a pair of boots on the back seat of the car. Injin casually said it was just Rio. Not realizing Rio was there, he explained that she just wanted to see the new guy for herself. Rudo felt a bit anxious since he had hardly ever talked to girls before. But then Rio started ruffling his hair, saying she liked its color. Meanwhile, Injin casually mentioned they were on their way to the cleaners' headquarters. Rudo and the other cleaners finally arrived at headquarters. He stepped out of the vehicle, unable to stop himself from staring at the massive building before them. Inside, Injin called Rudo over to introduce him to Semiyu, the receptionist, who was typically tasked with vetting all new recruits. Instead of just explaining Semiyu's ability, Injin let her demonstrate it by effortlessly spearing 2 flies out of the air with a fork. Semiyu greeted Rudo, mentioning Injin had already told her all about him, how he got here and where he came from. Still, she wanted to see his potential for herself. Injin explained that Semiyu's cool-looking glasses were actually her vital instrument, enhancing her kinetic vision to see someone's true nature when she focused. Rudo was surprised a vital instrument could be used that way. As Semiyu's eyes and glasses glowed, she stared deeply into Rudo and saw something shocking. She gave Injin a detailed analysis. Rudo was already athletic enough to skip physical training, and he had a strong connection with his vital instrument, though his control was still unstable. He needed consistent practice to activate his power on command. She also noted he had grime on his neck, which made Injin laugh, a natural consequence of playing in all that trash. After thanking Semiyu, Injin said he'd take Rudo to meet the boss. But before leaving, he noticed Semiyu was hiding something. On the way to the meeting room, Injin explained that there were about 100 cleaners in total, including combatants, guards, and supporters. They traveled constantly, so it was rare for everyone to be at headquarters at once. He suggested Rudo take time to meet his fellow cleaners, assuming it wouldn't be hard since there probably weren't many people around. But when he opened the dining hall door, he was shocked to find it packed with rough-looking cleaners, far more than expected. He quietly closed the door and said he'd introduce Rudo later. They soon arrived at the boss's office. As Rudo reached for the doorknob, eager to ask the boss how to return to the sphere, Injin stopped him. He explained that in this world, information was a highly valuable commodity, not given freely. He advised Rudo to offer to work as a cleaner in exchange for the information. When they first met, Injin had shared details about his own vital instrument because he felt it was necessary, but he warned Rudo not to ask about the boss's instrument. No one at headquarters knew what it was or how powerful it was. The cleaner's loyalty came not just from the boss's skills but also from his ability to build trust. After all that, Rudo anxiously opened the door, only to find the office empty. Injin was just as surprised. Semiyu then appeared from behind, apologizing for forgetting to mention the boss was on a business trip and wouldn't be back for a while. She was disappointed he'd left without any notice or warning. It seemed Rudo would be stuck here waiting. Meanwhile, Rio asked if Rudo wanted to come see her work. Since he couldn't officially join until the boss returned, she thought it'd be a good way to pass the time, and she wanted to learn more about him and what he could do. Semiyu then explained a client's request. A city near a contaminated zone reported small trash beasts approaching their barricade and wanted a cleanup for safety. Hearing this, Rudo was confused about what a contaminated zone was. Injin should have explained earlier but had simply called it a dump for simplicity. The land was divided into safe zones that supported human life and contaminated zones filled with trash where trash beasts lived. Where Rudo had landed was a highly dangerous contaminated zone known as No Man's Land. There were 6 confirmed surface zones, all so hazardous that most people would die immediately upon landing, overrun with beasts even experienced givers struggled with. In other words, Rudo was incredibly lucky Injin found him when he did. Rudo wondered what Injin was doing alone in No Man's Land, but Injin just said he was bored and wanted to stretch his legs. Semiyu gave Rudo a gas mask, telling him to wear it as much as possible in contaminated zones because breathing the toxic air could make him severely sick. In No Man's Land, he could die without a mask in about 15 minutes, depending on the air's potency. About 10 minutes later, they were all suited up and ready for their mission. Rio told Rudo this would be an easy job, so he should watch carefully. As they started, Rudo began to reflect, realizing this was the true picture of the hole he'd seen from inside the sphere. He never imagined people lived down here so freely. He wondered if the people up above knew about this underground world. But as he looked around, the contaminated zone seemed like a giant treasure trove. He really wanted to take everything back to repair things. Rudo noticed half the team was missing and asked Rio who they were. She explained they were also cleaners, known as supporters. They had no special powers but played a crucial role, helping the team with logistics and support. One of them approached Rudo and offered a handshake, but their hands locked. The man squeezed Rudo's hand painfully tight. It turned out he had a super grip strength, capable of crushing a trash beast's outer shell barehanded. Seeing all this, Rudo wasn't sure he could keep up with all this energy. Even if it was an easy job, he needed to watch and learn. Just then, they were alerted to the arrival of trash beasts. Rudo expected just one, but was shocked to see a whole horde emerging from the shadows. Rio urged him to stay calm. These types were slow and weak, proven by their struggle to damage the barricade. Rudo observed they seemed much tamer than what he faced when he first arrived. Then, a second wave of larger beasts charged the barricade with far more force. Rudo panicked, suggesting they call for backup, but Rio told him to calm down. They were just slightly tougher versions of the small ones. Perfect practice for a beginner like Rudo. The faster they collected these beasts, the sooner they could go home and throw Rudo a welcome party. Rudo just stared at her, wondering how she could be so relaxed in a life-threatening situation. Rio said if he wanted to survive here, he had to learn to stay calm. Right then, one beast broke through the fence, surprising even Rio. She realized it was much stronger than expected, not the best teaching material for Rudo. She stepped forward, planning to take it down alone. Rio somewhat enjoyed the feeling. A tough opponent got her blood pumping. Her vital instrument was a pair of scissors. First, they glowed bright green before she tossed them into the air, transforming them into something larger. She then swung them, wiping out the first wave of beasts in one attack. Rudo's jaw dropped as he watched her fighting style. She swung her weapon with her legs, not her hands. Gree explained her instrument was called the Ripper, and it's what made Rio special and set her apart from others. Gree also reminded Rudo not to let his guard down, even while observing. But then, one trash beast sneaked up behind Rudo and was about to attack. At the last second, Gree intervened, using her super strength to stop the beast and throw it to Rio for elimination. Seeing this, Rudo began to understand how the cleaners operated. Supporters couldn't defeat beasts alone but could immobilize them and set things up for the givers to land the final blow. It didn't take long to defeat all the level 1 trash beasts. Now Rio turned her attention to the final boss. The supporters were on their way to assist Rio on the front lines when one level 1 beast ambushed a supporter, knocking him to the ground. He was nearly eaten, but Rudo jumped in and blocked it at the last second. He didn't want to be a burden. He did everything he could to help. The adrenaline kicked in, and he transformed the pole he was holding into his vital instrument. It shifted into a spiked barrier, but unfortunately, Rudo still didn't know how to control his power. All he could do was hold his weapon and stare at the beast. It didn't take long for the beast to break through, but Rio dove in at the last second to save him. She was impressed. Rudo instinctively rushed to save a supporter, a quality of a good cleaner. The supporter admitted his carelessness and thanked Rudo and Rio. Gree then asked Rio if she'd defeated the final boss. Rio explained she tried slicing it in half, but it didn't work. She even hit it multiple times with her vital instrument, but it still wouldn't go down. It was weird for a trash beast to be resistant to vital instrument attacks, but Rio didn't care. It was still a trash beast, so she planned to beat it until it couldn't move. Hearing this, the supporters wished Rio luck and said they'd return to headquarters to report. Without wasting time, Rio jumped into the air and started slashing the beast all over. It screamed in pain, trying to shake her off, but Rio held on. She cut all the tentacles on its head and found a weak point, a small, glowing orange area. But before she could strike, the beast regrew its tentacles and went berserk, launching an attack that collapsed the ground under Rudo. As Rudo fell, he remembered how he always vowed to avenge Rigto and get back at all the jerks in the sphere. But now he couldn't even control his power and had ended up a burden. Just as he was about to plunge into the hole, Gree caught him in time, pulling him out and throwing him over her shoulder. She ran as fast as she could back to headquarters. She didn't know why Rudo froze at the last moment, but she gave him one piece of advice: if you have a goal, pursue it with everything you've got and achieve it while you still can. Meanwhile, Rio managed to catch the trash beast while it was distracted. She used her scissors to slice through its midsection, and it fell to the ground, defeated. Rudo and Gree rushed back to see if the beast was truly down, but when they arrived, they were shocked to see Rio holding a paper cutter. They realized this paper cutter was a vital instrument that had been powering the beast all along. Gree noted it was impossible for a trash beast to have one. Elsewhere, one of the men who tried to sell Rudo's body parts woke from a daze, confused about where he was. Before him stood a strange, hooded man who asked where the Spherate kid was. In the middle of the night, Zanko woke up to use the bathroom. On his way, he heard a loud noise from the cafeteria and decided to check it out. Inside, he was surprised to see the cleaners throwing a party. He spotted Rio walking toward him and asked what was happening. Rio said it was just a small welcome party for Rudo. Xena doubted everyone was there for Rudo and suspected they'd really come for the free drinks. But Rio said it was fine. It was a good chance to relax since the boss was away. Xena looked around and noticed Rudo, who clearly wasn't enjoying his own party. Rio explained he was upset because his vital instrument had been damaged during work yesterday, and he'd been in a bad mood ever since. Talking about yesterday, Zanka heard they'd fought a strange trash beast and asked for details. Rio said it was unlike anything they'd seen before. It wasn't a beast but an object, which she believed was a vital instrument. The idea of a trash beast created and powered by a vital instrument deeply worried her. She said she didn't know how to deal with it and grew somber. Xena started feeling sorry for her until her expression shifted and she said she'd just handed the job to a higher-ranked member and come back to eat and relax. Zanker rolled his eyes, realizing she hadn't changed a bit. Meanwhile, Rudo was still sulking over his poor performance in battle. That's when someone approached him. He introduced himself as Gree Rubian, one of the supporters from yesterday's fight. Gree told Rudo he'd actually done great. He'd even protected Fala from being eaten by the trash beast. Rudo wasn't sure who Fala was, so Gree explained he was the young, glasses-wearing supporter. Even so, Rudo remained unsatisfied. In the moment, he couldn't control his power when it mattered, so Gree and Rio had to step in. That's how it always was for him in Sphere. He'd lose his cool and make mistakes with Regging chasing him. He wanted to return to Sphere immediately but felt his condition hadn't improved at all. He kept calling himself useless trash. After hearing all this, Gree simply said, "Thank you." Rudo looked up confused. Gree explained that most people saw supporters like them as weak and helpless. Even some cleaners once thought that way, but Rudo never treated them like that. Gree pointed toward Follow and said he'd joined the cleaners to help clean up trash beasts, but everyone knew you couldn't kill them without power. That's why he built his own vital instrument, hoping to become a giver one day. Follow had sworn to remain a supporter even if he became a giver, just to prove his haters wrong. He worked hard to make it happen. Gree told Rudo to forget chasing power just to meet others' expectations and instead asked what he'd always wanted to do. Before he came to the surface, before all the bad things happened, was there something he'd always dreamed of? Rudo thought but couldn't give a clear answer. Gree told him to remember his original goal and return to his first principle. If he could do that, his true path would become clear. As Gree patted his head, Rudo grew emotional, nearly crying, when Injin suddenly landed on his shoulder. Injin noticed Rudo had been quiet all night and asked if he'd eaten. Rio interrupted, warning that if he didn't eat soon, others would take his food, even though it was his party. Xena told Rio she wasn't one to talk since she'd eaten more than anyone. Gree and the others invited Rudo to try the food before it was gone. Slowly, Rudo stood and followed them. A minute later, as he was busy eating pizza, a cleaner turned the music up loud, grabbed a spray can, and started painting the wall. The machine told Rudo this guy was named Gob. He never let anyone tell him what he could or couldn't do. As he sprayed, other cleaners complained about the bad smell, but Gob ignored them. Meanwhile, in an underground hideout, the man who'd tried to kidnap Rudo was being tortured by an unknown figure. The man begged for his life, saying he'd already told everything. The figure realized he was no longer useful and killed him outright. Next target, tracked down Rudo, the sprayed giver he'd heard about. Elsewhere, Semiyu received an important work call. Minutes later, he gathered the cleaners and announced they'd just received a new request. Before Semiyu could give mission details, Zanka interrupted and asked why Rudo was there. He knew he was supposed to be Rudo's trainer but thought that would happen after Rudo officially joined the team. Rudo wasn't a real cleaner yet. Seiyu explained he'd called him because the mission involved him. He said a merchant had been attacked by a trash-dumping beast while crossing a contaminated zone. The creature had stolen the merchant's valuable cargo. Their request was simple: kill the beast and retrieve the cargo, which was a live person who descended from Sphere. Rudo jolted in shock. Semiyu added that finding two live Sphere descendants so close together was rare, so he thought he'd want to know. It might even give Rudo clues on how to return to Sphere. Gree guessed Rudo must have mixed feelings, so he said it was up to him whether he came or not. Rudo knew he still couldn't use his power well, meaning he could be a burden needing protection, but the chance to get clues to go home was more important, so he decided to go. Seiyu said he'd originally planned to send Jin with them, but Jin had other work, so he entrusted the mission to Zanka. He was sure they'd be fine as long as Zanka went too. After everything was explained, Zanka took the lead. As they set off, Rudo walked beside Gree and noticed he wasn't carrying a weapon. Gree said he had a knife for self-defense but usually fought barehanded. It was what he was used to. Follow joined in, telling Rudo that Gree carried a special charm he always prayed to, asking for everyone's safe return. Embarrassed, Gree told Fo to be quiet. He showed the charm to Rudo, saying it was just cheap jewelry he bought at a store. He figured it was fine to pray it wouldn't hurt anyone. Just then, a strangely dressed woman sneaked up from behind. She said she was the merchant who hired them and would guide them to the trash beast's nest. Hearing she was the client, Rudo immediately showered her with questions about the spare parts he'd found. She explained she'd been transporting her goods when she found them and brought them in. Unfortunately, they were unconscious, so she didn't get to ask anything. The woman said she was worried about the Sphere descendants, which was why she wanted to retrieve them from the trash-dumping beast. Rudo grew suspicious she planned to sell the property, but she denied it and insisted she was genuinely concerned. With that, they continued their journey. Zanka doubted the spirit was still alive. Trash beasts attacked humans on sight. Still, it felt odd for a trash beast to kidnap someone instead of killing them. A lot had changed lately, and it didn't feel right to him. The woman pointed to a nearby building, saying the trash-dumping beast had run inside carrying the spirit. Moments later, the cleaners entered carefully, staying alert. Soon, they saw someone tied up ahead and thought it was the Sphere descendant, but then the woman started acting strange, pushing them into the middle of the room. Once everyone was there, they realized the hostage was just a doll. The woman signaled to someone to hurry and capture the Sphere child, then stepped back. Right then, the floor collapsed, and the cleaners fell 2 stories down. The woman pointed at Rudo and declared she'd trapped the sprayed giver. Zanka instantly realized they'd been ambushed. 2 figures carrying glowing purple lanterns emerged from the darkness, announcing they were here for Rudo. Gree knew Rudo didn't know who they were, so he quickly explained, "They're raiders." They started as ordinary thieves, but in recent years, their methods turned brutal. There are even rumors they're involved in dark experiments. Gree warned they had to be careful. Every raider was a giver. He ordered the support team to secure an escape route while he and Fal protected Rudo. Before leaving, Gree asked Zanka if he could handle this fight. Zanka said yes and told Gree and the others to evacuate immediately. As they ran toward the exit, Rudo asked why they were retreating. He thought he could face the raiders. But Grizz told him they weren't like the kidnapper he'd first met here. Their top priority was escaping safely since they didn't know the raiders' strength. Hearing that, Rudo felt like a useless burden who couldn't protect himself. Meanwhile, Zanka spoke with the raiders, saying he wasn't surprised by the ambush. He knew it was only a matter of time before they tracked Rudo down. He assumed they just wanted to sell Rudo for a high price. But the raiders said they weren't planning to sell him. Instead, they wanted to learn more about Sphere, and thought questioning a survivor was the fastest way. They were especially curious how he'd crossed the border without dying. Zanka didn't care about Sphere, so if this was a trap for Rudo, he figured it meant there was no trash monster to fight. The raiders admitted there might be no monster, but there were several mud dolls. From the strange old woman to the collapsing floor, Zanka started piecing it together. Suspecting this was one of the raiders' powers, Zanka activated his staff and easily defeated the mud dolls at first, but it wasn't as simple as he thought. One raider hid among them, disguised as a doll, and launched a surprise attack from behind. The tactic worked. Zanka took several consecutive hits. The raiders were confident he was no match for them, since cleaners were used to fighting trash monsters, not humanoids. Plus, he used his power to turn part of the floor into mud, trapping Zanka without him realizing. He warned Zanka not to move much. The more he moved, the deeper he'd sink. He said only he could fight him, and once he died, it was all over. He kept rambling until Zanka got annoyed and told him to shut up. His cunning tactics were starting to irritate him. At first, he thought the woman used her shovel to control the mud while her partner attacked, but he realized he was wrong. He also noticed the woman wearing something like snowshoes. He'd heard they made it easier to walk on unstable ground. He'd thought she was his partner because she could move freely in the mud. Zanka mocked them, saying he'd never seen such a perfect pair. The two raiders got angry, but it didn't matter. They might have more battle experience, but Zanka knew his vital instrument inside out and believed that made him superior. Confidently, he plunged his vital instrument into the ground, sending out a wide shockwave that let him distinguish the real enemies from the dolls. He rushed forward and defeated both raiders in one smooth move. The mud dolls collapsed, and Zanka thought it was all over until a much stronger opponent suddenly sneaked up from behind. At the same time, Rudo and the others continued fleeing from danger. When Rudo looked back, he heard nothing more and began to wonder how Zanka was faring. The supporters suddenly stopped as they finally reached the exit safely. Green managed to open the door, but upon looking inside, realized they couldn't use their vital instruments there. He ordered the others to go up and call for backup. Meanwhile, Grizz said he would go back to check on Zanka. But before he could leave, he froze upon hearing footsteps approaching. Griff assumed it was Zanka returning from the fight and called out, asking if he was hurt. Instead, a dreadlocked raider named Jabber emerged from the darkness, staring coldly at them. He observed Rudo's face and body for a moment, then confirmed that Rudo was the one who caused the flood. Immediately after, Jabber leapt onto the wall behind them and shattered the exit with his bare hands, blocking their escape. As the dust settled, Gree realized the situation was bad. There were far more raiders than he had anticipated. Jabber admitted he was late and hadn't expected them to get this far. Gree demanded to know where Zanka was, but Jabber ignored him and kept his focus on Rudo. He ordered Rudo to come with him, stating that a very important person wanted to meet him. He then tore off Rudo's gas mask, saying there were no trash monsters around, so he didn't need it. Rudo angrily demanded to know what happened to Zanka. Jabber replied that he didn't kill him, only knocked him down because he prefers to be relaxed when his opponent is strong. However, he had injected his poison into Zanka, leaving him paralyzed. After saying this, Jabber summoned his vital instrument and ordered Rudo to follow him. At that moment, the supporters launched a combined attack, but Jabber easily deflected it. Gree then stepped in front of Rudo, bravely declaring he would do anything to protect his team, even at the cost of his life. Hearing this, Jabber realized Gree was a supporter. To him, supporters were nothing but weak people pretending to be heroes. Jabber then drew his vital instrument and prepared to attack. Rudo shouted at Gree to move aside, insisting he could handle Jabber himself. But Gree didn't respond and refused to budge. The next moment, Jabber coldly declared that Gree was already dead, having just stabbed him in the stomach with his claw. Rudo's eyes widened in horror as he saw Gree's blood-stained talisman flying through the air. A flashback to when Rudo was still living as a sphere. Redo had just returned from work to find Rudo banging his head against the wall. Worried, Redo rushed to stop him and saw Rudo's forehead covered in blood. Rudo fell to the ground, telling Redo that since he was ordered not to hurt others, he thought it better to hurt himself. Hearing this, Redo sighed and firmly told him that was not allowed. He asked Rudo what had driven him to do such a thing, but Rudo couldn't give an answer. All he could describe was a feeling of anger rising within him, with no clear reason. Listening carefully, Redo realized Rudo had convinced himself he was worthless since being abandoned as a baby. Redo guessed that void had slowly turned into anger over time. Remembering this, Redo stood up and told Rudo they should go out together after his wound was treated. Redo explained that one reason Rudo felt empty was because he hadn't found what he liked. That day, Redo wanted them to go out and try new things together, little by little, until Rudo found what made him happy. Over time, Redo said Rudo's empty room would fill with things he loved. But when the time came for Rudo to bring a girl home, Redo asked for a warning first. As planned, they spent the afternoon trying various sports and activities. By the end of the day, Redo admitted that while Rudo showed interest, they still hadn't found the right activity for him. But Redo reminded him it was only the first day, and there was much more to explore. At that moment, Rudo's attention was caught by a man responsibly disposing of his trash. Rudo immediately ran over, dug through the bin, and pulled something out, then knelt down. He began crying while holding a slightly damaged mask that had been discarded, though it wasn't broken. Redo asked what was wrong, and Rudo explained that even though the mask was a little damaged, it still had a lot of life force. Seeing this, Redo realized it was more than just Rudo's imagination. He genuinely saw value in things others deemed worthless. Reviving that core memory now awakened Rudo's true power. As he held Gree's talisman, a glowing red aura surrounded him. Gree watched in shock, realizing this was the real reason Rudo couldn't use his vital instrument in the past. They had been wrong all along. Rudo's power wasn't about turning objects into vital instruments, it was about drawing out their true and full value. Before their eyes, Gree's talisman transformed into a giant mystical creature with a single eye in the center, fully under Rudo's control. Jabber was so amazed he began drooling, unable to contain his excitement. Curious, he asked Rudo if that was his vital instrument and what power it had. At that moment, Rudo turned to Gree and realized Gree had helped him awaken this power by guiding him to revive that core memory. Without Gree's guidance, Rudo knew he would have continued raging blindly. But now things were different. He vowed to prove Jabber wrong and show that all the taunts against him meant nothing. However, Jabber found Rudo's anger entertaining. To him, nothing was more amusing than facing a strong opponent. Grinning, Jabber unsheathed his claws and said he wanted to have fun with Rudo before dragging him back to headquarters. Meanwhile, Foe tried to stop the bleeding from Gree's wound but started panicking as it wouldn't stop. Still, Gree reassured him not to worry and calmly said he would be fine. More importantly, Gree acknowledged that the reason Rudo couldn't use his vital instrument during their last mission was because he was overwhelmed by too many emotions at once, obscuring his true purpose. Now that Rudo realized that purpose, Gree was sure there was nothing left to fear. Just then, Jabber lunged at Rudo. But Rudo easily dodged the attack, leaving Jabber wide-eyed in surprise. He complained that it wasn't fun at all and immediately launched a furious barrage of attacks. Yet Rudo avoided every one. Stunned, Jabber realized none of his attacks had hit their mark. Rudo then explained that Gree had used his talisman to pray for everyone's safety. In return, Rudo intended to honor that prayer with the strongest possible defense by avoiding every attack. Hearing this, Jabber assumed Rudo's ability was some kind of power that allowed him to evade attacks. But Rudo corrected him, saying he hadn't moved a step, it was Jabber who had been forced back at the last moment. Jabber didn't understand, so he charged again, determined to deliver a finishing blow. But just before he could land it, the talisman detected his hostile movement and froze him in midair, leaving him wide open for Rudo's punch. Rudo landed a solid blow to his face. Though Jabber slid back, he remained standing. Blood trickled from his nose as his excitement grew. He finally realized Rudo's power, the ability to summon that mystical creature and use its eye to control the flow of movement. From there, all Rudo had to do was attack directly. Rudo reminded Jabber that he had said he wanted to play before capturing him. So Rudo declared he would keep playing until Jabber was nothing but a heap on the floor. Jabber tried a sneak attack next, but the talisman's eye detected it immediately, allowing Rudo to land another punch. Changing tactics, Jabber tried to confuse the eye by dashing at high speed. He even threw heavy cement blocks at Rudo as distractions before attempting to attack from behind. Yet again, the eye detected it, and Rudo countered with a solid punch, even as the battle turned against him. Jabber refused to retreat. He attacked at full speed, striking again and again, only to be tracked by the eye each time. And each time, Rudo's punches landed perfectly. At one point, Rudo delivered a powerful blow that sent Jabber staggering back until he collapsed against the wall. Jabber chuckled softly, admitting it had been a long time since he'd taken such a solid hit. However, he pointed out that during the fight, he had noticed something interesting about Rudo's fighting style. He explained that Rudo's vital instrument only reacted to malicious intent directed straight at him. As evidence, he mentioned how earlier in the battle, he had thrown a piece of debris as a smokescreen. At that moment, he realized Rudo's vital instrument didn't respond at all because it wasn't triggered by a threat without its own will. Rudo didn't understand why that detail was so important, but Jabber grinned and continued his explanation. He revealed that his right claw contained a powerful neurotoxin. Without hesitation, Jabber suddenly stabbed himself with the neurotoxin and then laughed maniacally. He continued laughing while mocking Rudo, saying that now he had injected the neurotoxin into himself, he would soon lose control over his own mind and body. And when that happened, how would Rudo's vital instrument handle an opponent attacking without any conscious intent at all? The next moment, Jabber suddenly awoke, screaming with all his might, his eyes completely pale with madness. He spun and launched a swift attack at Rudo, who barely dodged at the last second. Realizing Jabber was far stronger than before, Rudo wondered how it was possible while searching for a way to fight back. He glanced to the side where Spot was administering first aid to Grist and realized continuing the fight here would only endanger Gree and Follow. He immediately tried to lure Jabber away, but Jabber closed the distance and attacked again. Rudo attempted to use his charm to control Jabber's movements, but to his surprise, it failed to activate. He barely managed to block Jabber's blow with his arm, using the raw power of his vital instrument to throw him down. Unfortunately, the impact wasn't enough. Jabber rose again within seconds. Seeing this, Rudo understood Jabber had gone berserk from an overdose of his own poison. Since Gree's charm only reacted to malicious intent, it offered no protection against Jabber in this state. Rudo was stunned that Jabber had found a way to counter them so quickly. Now, he realized Jabber had become what people called a masochist. This thought brought back a childhood memory of neighborhood bullies mocking him with that word because he refused to fight back. After the beating, he ran to Redo to ask what it meant, but Redo admitted he didn't know either. Back in the present, Rudo found himself at a loss on how to fight someone like Jabber in this condition. Jabber attacked with killing intent, forcing Rudo to desperately dodge blow after blow. Then, Jabber launched an attack Rudo knew he couldn't avoid. At the last moment, a vital instrument pierced the air, intercepting the attack and saving Rudo. Looking closer, Rudo immediately recognized the blue stick. Turning, he saw Zonka glaring fiercely. Zonka told him he'd done more than enough and would take over from here. Rudo rushed over and asked how Zonka had survived the poison, but Zonka simply replied that Rudo shouldn't underestimate him. Moreover, Zonka pointed out he'd seen Rudo finally activate his vital instrument and admitted it looked pretty cool. However, Rudo quickly warned him that ability didn't work on Jabber in his berserk state, all they could do was evade. Zonka then asked if Rudo's instrument was triggered by malicious intent. When Rudo confirmed and asked how he knew, Zonka explained he'd been observing the fight before stepping in, analyzing how the ability worked. With that, Zonka proposed a plan. Since Jabber's leg was broken and his movement limited, they could use Rudo's weapon differently. He asked Rudo to let him hit him. Rudo was shocked by the strange request. Zonka clarified, if Rudo was struck, the charm might pull him directly toward Jabber, allowing him to land a decisive blow. And since Zonka's blue stick had longer reach than Rudo's fists, it should hit before Jabber's claws. Rudo hesitated, pointing out that if Zonka's theory was wrong, he'd just take a pointless hit. Zonka shrugged, asserting that if that happened, he'd just have to endure it. Before they could continue, their conversation was cut short as Jabber rose again and launched a devastating attack. Both Rudo and Zonka barely avoided it. Afterwards, Zonka warned Rudo not to let Jabber's claws graze him, as even the smallest scratch was enough to take him down permanently. However, Rudo told Zonka to just keep attacking him. So, as Zonka prepared to launch a full-force strike, Rudo's vital instrument immediately reacted, thrusting Zonka right in front of Jabber. With perfect timing, Zonka and Rudo fell silent for a moment. Shocked by their success, Jabber immediately counterattacked. Zonka struck again, and as he did, he was teleported right in front of Jabber, allowing him to deliver a crushing overhead blow with his stick. Recognizing the strategy, the two repeated it, using this unexpected technique to pummel Jabber unconscious just before they could unleash a final blow. The poison in Jabber's body began to fade. Xena seized the opportunity to deliver one last downward strike, slamming Jabber into the ground, but it was in vain. Zanka was so drained he couldn't stand. He fell onto his back, groaning as his whole body ached. Simultaneously, Rudo's vital instrument suddenly turned to stone and crumbled in his hand. Rudo knelt, staring at the dust. Seeing this, Zanka realized Rudo's created weapon must have only existed for a limited time. Then, Rudo's body suddenly convulsed. He collapsed to the ground, seizing and unable to move. Xena immediately recognized the signs. Rudo had been poisoned by Jabber's claw. Meanwhile, Jabber injected himself with chemicals from his own claw, instantly regaining his strength as if the fight had never happened. Zanka stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Jabber could still move after all that. Jabber calmly explained that the chemicals in his left claw allowed him to eliminate pain within seconds, while the poison in his right claw only lasted about 10 minutes because he built immunity to it. However, that same poison would last about 30 minutes on others. To make matters worse, Jabber stabbed Zanka again, refreshing the dose. Then, with Rudo trembling helplessly, Jabber lifted him and carried him away. Xena, paralyzed, could only watch as Rudo was taken. Jabber ran, holding him until he leapt out of the hole he'd originally entered from. But upon reaching the surface, he was stunned. He was outside. The hole was supposed to lead into a building. Confused, he glanced to the side and saw Rio standing in the distance. Before he could act, his stomach was slammed by Injin's umbrella, forcing him to drop Rudo. Jin and the other cleanup crew members gathered, telling Jabber he'd made a huge mistake. Jabber was now cornered. Injin saw the large hole in the ground. Realizing it was so deep that even their limited communication wouldn't send a signal that far, he suspected this had been Jabber's plan all along, to trap the others deep below so they couldn't call for help. If Tom hadn't found a phone in the nearest town and contacted them, they'd never have known. Hearing this, Tom became emotional, worried that Gree and the others underground might already be dead. But Injin placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him not to worry because they were tougher than that. He then ordered him to take a few members and head into the hole for a rescue mission. Rio glanced at Rudo, realizing his condition was better than expected. But Kane immediately objected, pointing out that Rudo looked terrible and was barely breathing. Delman, seeing Rudo's state, exploded with anger. He turned to Jabber and swore he'd pay for hurting one of them. Injin backed him up, stating that Jabber wouldn't mess with the cleanup crew and get away with it. However, Jabber wasn't intimidated at all. He stood back up and told them he had his own orders. He was supposed to bring Rudo back with him, and there was no way he could return without completing that mission. He said this while charging energy into his vital instrument, just as he was about to attack. A blue-haired girl suddenly appeared and hugged him tightly from behind, telling him he'd done enough and needed to return to base. Jabber argued, saying he wasn't ready to leave because he still hadn't secured Rudo, but the girl remained calm and insisted he go home. Injin could only watch in confusion, wondering where this girl had suddenly come from. Jabber kept refusing until the girl mentioned that his boss was smiling widely when his name was mentioned. That silenced him. The girl released him after realizing he was finally willing to listen. Jabber then turned to the cleanup crew and said he had to go now as he saw a manhole-shaped portal open behind them. Rio noticed this and was stunned. Before stepping in, Jabber looked at Rudo and said he had real skill for a spirit. He added that the poison he'd given him wouldn't kill him, it would only knock him out for a while. Jabber was about to walk away but was shocked when Rudo suddenly called out to him. Though still lying weak on the ground, Rudo mustered enough strength to say their business wasn't over, not until he paid Jabber back for what he did to Gree. Hearing this surprised Jabber, as he hadn't expected Rudo to still be conscious after his poison, but then his eyes shifted to Rudo's hand, where he saw a familiar pattern. He commented that it was quite a coincidence they had patterns from the same series, and said his boss would be happy to hear about it. The cleanup crew was completely baffled by what Jabber meant, and all they could do was stare. Before disappearing, Jabber told Rudo he'd be back next time, properly prepared. With that, he slipped into the manhole portal and vanished instantly. The cleanup crew was shocked to see him disappear. From the look on Rudo's face, it was clear he was furious, but he also wondered what Jabber had meant by those words. About half an hour later, the cleanup crew members trapped in the tunnel with Rudo were finally rescued. Once free, Rudo rushed to Gree's side to check on him. Seeing Gree in such a poor medical condition broke his heart. He sincerely apologized to Gree for destroying his charm. Gree mustered the strength to respond, telling Rudo that while the amulet was precious, what mattered more was using it against Jabber. He reassured Rudo that his performance on the field was what truly counted. Later, back at headquarters, Rudo sat alone, clearly still upset. Injin joined him, asking why he was so down and praising him for finally learning to use his vital instrument. Instead of cheering up, Rudo vented his frustration. He was angry about what Jabber did to Gree. Inside the sphere, he couldn't protect the person who saved him, and now it happened again. Every time he thought he had changed and moved forward, he failed again, making him wonder if he was destined to fail forever. Injin told him Gree knew the risks of being a cleaner. He was the type to risk his life for the team without hesitation. Gree didn't protect Rudo just because he was a reserve. He saw him as a kindred spirit who valued things and people the same way. Injin encouraged Rudo to go inside and pay his respects to Gree. When Rudo entered, expecting to see a corpse, he froze in shock seeing Gree alive. Injin and Tom patted Rudo's head, realizing his earlier mood was because he thought Gree had died. Gree said they shouldn't write him off yet. He was alive and well. Rudo couldn't understand, seeing Gree claw at his chest, which should have been fatal for any normal human. Gree explained he survived thanks to the cleaners' medical team, introducing Aisha, the only healer among them. All eyes turned to her, and she nervously downplayed her role, saying she was usually useless and just happened to be helpful this time. Rudo was surprised by her humility, but Injin explained she was just shy. Gree was deeply grateful, thanking her for saving his life and thanking Follow for pulling him out of Jabber's rampage. Gree was like an older brother to Follow, making the words deeply touching. Follow sobbed and hugged him tightly. Gree then turned to Rudo, praising his performance in battle against someone as strong as Jabber. He held his ground and worked well with Zonka. Plus, Gree was happy the amulet he cherished had been useful to Rudo. Injin brought up the bigger picture. The raiders seemed to be deliberately targeting cleaners now, meaning their enemies weren't just littering beasts. But there was good news. They had new intel. During the fight, a raider mentioned something called the border. Just then, a man entered, suggesting the raiders were digging into research about the sphere. Injin called him boss. Rudo stiffened, realizing this must be the leader of the cleaners. The man approached Rudo, apologizing for not being there to welcome him on his first day, and introduced himself as Corvus, the head of the cleaners. Corvus admitted he initially thought Rudo was only there temporarily to gather information and was ready to kick him out, but after seeing how Rudo connected with the cleaners and even risked his life to protect them, Corvus was convinced he had a special strength valuable to their cause. Without complaint, Corvus officially welcomed Rudo as a cleaner, telling him to come to his office for a new uniform and to share something important. In his office, Corvus explained the border was a space between the sphere and the surface. Anyone trying to cross it supposedly died. But there was a strange rumor. A woman lived in the no-man's land near the border. Once, a lost traveler was helped by her. When he asked why she lived there, she replied, "I lie here to watch the people falling from above." Stranger still, she claims some came and went without dying. This made Corvus believe it might actually be possible to cross the border alive. Rudo realized this meant if he could find one of the people she saw, he might learn how to reach the sphere and even how he survived his fall. Corvus confirmed this and asked if Rudo planned to stay or go. Rudo answered with determination, he would go. Just then, Injin entered, commenting that Rudo looked cool in his cleaner uniform. Sometime later, Rudo headed to the no-man's land to find the mysterious woman Corvus told him about, but Follow desperately tried to stop him, warning he shouldn't go yet. Follow's efforts were useless. Rudo dragged him across the floor effortlessly, stunning Follow with his strength. Rudo's eyes burned with anger as he declared going to the no-man's land was the only way to find clues on returning to the sphere. But when Injin called out, Rudo froze. Injin warned he couldn't just rush into such a dangerous place unprepared. Sure, it was great Rudo could use his power now, but he didn't know his limits or weaknesses yet. Charging blindly into no man's land was basically a death sentence. That's why Injin said he would go with him. Not only could he keep Rudo alive, but he could also learn about the raiders they faced. Hearing that, Rudo asked how raiders could be givers. Injin explained not everyone with a good heart looks it. Some seem kind but treat things like trash, while others seem cruel but deeply care for items. In other words, morality had nothing to do with who could be a giver. Rudo realized he was wrong to assume bad people never cared for things, but even so, he couldn't hide his hatred for the raiders. As tension eased, Injin left, telling Rudo to at least rest that night. The non-stop chaos of recent days meant he needed sleep. Rudo headed to his room, lay on his bed, and stared at the ceiling. Injin told him to relax, but he didn't know how. He wasn't used to sleeping long, and part of him wished he could scavenge trash now. Just then, Rio came in, announcing she'd show him around headquarters since he was now an official cleaner. She gave him a quick tour of the most popular spots in the building. Along the way, she asked about food in the sphere. Rudo said he only had staples like bread and soup. Rio then asked if he'd ever had candy. The question made Rudo shudder. Candy in the sphere was so rare only the rich could afford it. Rio laughed and told him they had plenty of candy at headquarters. Rudo jolted in shock as she showed him the huge stockpile the cleaners had saved. Injin explained candy was more popular than drugs here, and while Rudo could have some, he warned him not to get addicted. But when Rudo took a bite, he was mesmerized by the taste. He devoured it handful by handful until he tore through the entire pile. Injin warned him he'd get fat, but Rudo didn't care. He'd never tasted anything so delicious in his life. As he kept eating, Deer walked over and stared coldly. Rudo assumed Deer was angry he monopolized the candy, so he politely offered one. Deer immediately snatched it and shoved it in his mouth. Tension rose, and a fight seemed imminent, but Bro dragged Deer back before things escalated. Meanwhile, Zanka was walking the hall when he saw a fat man trying to leave a room. Thinking it was an intruder, he called for help until he realized it was just Rudo, bloated from eating too much candy. Later that day, Rudo returned to normal and went out to practice with his power, but nothing worked. Injin laughed, joking Rudo must have eaten so much candy he forgot how to use it. Rudo insisted he remembered the feeling, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing happened. That's when Zanka chimed in. He remembered Rudo liked fixing discarded items, so he suggested maybe Rudo needed real trash nearby to activate his ability. To test it, Zanka dumped a pile of garbage in front of him and told him to see if anything was useful. Rudo dug through it, picking random parts, and this time when he tried his power, it worked. The trash turned into a vital instrument right before their eyes. Jin saw this and realized Zanka was right. He praised him, calling him a great trainer. Zanka blushed at the compliment but quickly composed himself. Rudo's next test was to see if he could make several weapons at once. As Zanka predicted, he did it easily. But soon after, Rudo fainted with a nosebleed. His body couldn't handle the strain of producing so many instruments at once. Injin suspected it was also due to the exceptional quality of Rudo's gloves. Curious, Rudo asked what he meant. Injin explained the longer an item was cared for, the stronger it became, a process called instrument quality enhancement. But in battle, quality wasn't everything. Experience and mindset were just as important. Zanka nodded, adding that since Rudo had cared for the gloves since childhood, their quality must be very high. But he wondered if that alone pushed Rudo's body this far, or if the series Jabber mentioned had something to do with it. Meanwhile, Rudo stared at the ground, blood dripping from his nose, and started thinking, why did the vital instrument he created from Gree's amulet end up shattered? The weapons he just made were fine, and even when he switched them, they remained intact. He thought there might be a time limit. Rio then spoke up, hinting the amulet vanished because it had fulfilled its purpose. Zanka agreed, noting it only shattered after the battle ended. When Rudo was safe again, Injin supported this idea, saying, maybe that's Rudo's true power, to dig out the full value of broken or discarded items, let them function as intended, then let them rest. Rudo didn't destroy Gree's amulet by turning it into a weapon, he let it reach its full potential, and after it completed its role as a protector, it naturally faded. Hearing this, Rudo finally realized his power wasn't about destroying things, it was about unlocking their maximum potential. However, Rio couldn't ignore Jabber's words about Rudo's gloves being part of something called a series. Could there be more people like them out there? She suddenly got an idea and asked Rudo if his gloves had a special name. Rudo seemed confused by the question, so Rio explained that when you truly love something, you usually name it to make it special. Rudo admitted he never thought to name them. Injin suggested he do it right away. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Jabber and his teammate returned to base to report. There, they found their boss sitting alone at the edge of the room. The boss revealed something shocking. Rudo's gloves were part of the Watchmen series.